Are mantras just ancient religious rituals? Or, could they actually be highly advanced neurotechnology? It's a wildly fascinating question, right? For thousands of years, people have repeated these specific words and sounds, swearing it brings them peace, clarity, and even spiritual evolution. But what if there's a hard, measurable neuroscientific mechanism actually at play here? What if these ancient practices were quite literally designed to physically rewire the human brain?
Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to completely demystify the ancient practice of japa, or repetitive chanting, by looking at it straight through the lens of modern clinical data. We're pulling directly from the incredible research of Dr. Sweta Adatsya and her work over at the Limitless Brain Lab. They run deep scientific research to see exactly how the mind and brain physically change from repetitive chanting. So we're looking right past the dogma and we're diving straight into the hard data to see what actually happens inside your skull when you chant.
Okay, let's dive into this roadmap. We are taking a highly structured look at this. First, we'll cover the neuroscience of japa, followed by 3 ways to chant. Then, we'll look at rewiring your brain, silencing the mental chatterbox, the science of 108, and finally, finding your brain's frequency. Let's get to it.
Starting with Section 1, the neuroscience of japa.
Before we even touch on any spiritual claims, we absolutely have to establish the baseline of what physically happens when you repeat a sound. The literal moment you begin to chant out loud, you're generating a specific acoustic frequency. And this frequency kicks off a massive cascade of physiological changes. First off, your brain immediately drops its production of cortisol, that's your primary stress hormone. Next, it activates the vagus nerve, which flips your body into that crucial rest and digest healing state. But get this, it actually goes way beyond just temporary relaxation. Research out of Duke University proves that repetitive chanting leads to a structural increase in your brain's volume. It literally forces your memory center, the hippocampus, to get thicker and stronger. You are, quite literally, building a more robust brain. No way, right?
Moving right along to Section 2, 3 ways to chant.
So now that we know there's a physical impact, we've got to realize not all chanting is actually done the same way. According to the research, there are 3 distinct types. First up is Vaikari, and that's chanting out loud. If you're dealing with, say, acute stress, high anxiety, or you really need to lower your blood pressure, this out loud method is heavily prescribed for immediate medical relief. Second is Mansik. Now this is purely mental chanting. This is the method you'd use when your goal is more about long-term spiritual evolution, deep progress, or reaching those higher cognitive states. And the third is Apanshu, which is a whispered chant, kind of sitting right there in the sweet spot between the two.
Which brings us to Section 3, rewiring your brain.
Now what's really interesting about this slide is how chanting creates permanent change. It all comes down to this foundational law of neuroscience known as the Hebbian principle. It simply states, neurons that fire together wire together. Right? When you engage in repetitive chanting, that continuous rhythm creates this unbelievable synchronicity in your brain cells. It forces neurogenesis, the actual creation of new brain cells, and causes them to fire in a highly coherent, synchronized pattern. The repetition tightly wires these new neural connections together, which over time fundamentally alters the physical structure of your brain. It's like building a muscle, but in your mind.
And this neuroscientific perspective gives us such an amazing new lens on ancient tools like the japa mala, those strings of prayer beads. Ancient Hindu scriptures told practitioners to never touch the mala with their index finger, seeing it as a symbol of anger or pointing. While clinical research from the Limitless Brain Lab reveals something absolutely incredible. The ancients hit the nail on the head, and they didn't even have MRI machines. Touching the beads with your middle finger actually maximizes the activation of your vagus nerve and that physiological calming process we just talked about. Plus, the physical touch gives you a vital anchoring effect. Whenever your mind inevitably gets distracted, because let's face it, we're human, the physical sensation of moving the bead instantly tells the brain to stop overthinking and refocus on the chant. It is literally an ancient focus-pulling technology.
All right, Section 4, silencing the mental chatterbox.
Let's talk about dealing with our endless internal monologue. Because honestly, this is perhaps the greatest psychological benefit of the whole practice. Inside all of us is something called the default mode network, or the DMN. When you aren't focused on a specific task, boom, your DMN turns on. It's that loud, continuous mental chatterbox constantly analyzing what happened yesterday or worrying about what might happen tomorrow. Dr. Adada's research shows that people who utilize japa consistently have a remarkably quiet default mode network.
Chanting just immediately calms this network down. And what happens when your DMN is finally quiet? You find incredible mental clarity. Your performance capacity just skyrockets, you generate way better ideas, and your baseline anxiety drastically drops because you just aren't trapped in that endless loop of worry anymore. And this brilliantly illustrates that it isn't just some subjective feeling. Look at the famous 2001 Bernardi study. Clinical evidence proves that rhythmic chanting physically synchronizes your breath with your brain, which directly stabilizes your heart rate variability. So the effect isn't just a placebo or a passing feeling, it's a measurable, profound calming effect that cascades through your entire physiology.
That takes us to Section 5, the Science of 108.
So, if you've ever looked into Eastern chanting practices at all, you have absolutely come across this specific number, 108. It's the number of beads on a standard mala. It's the prescribed number of times you're supposedly meant to repeat a mantra. But why this exact number? Have you ever wondered that? Why not a flat 100? Or, 99? 105? Is it just completely arbitrary, or is there an actual functional reason this specific count is utilized universally across so many different traditions?
Well, the answer is absolutely stunning. When researchers hook people up to a 22-channel EEG machine, which basically maps the brain's wave patterns, they can clearly see the brain's activity altering during the chant. And it turns out, repeating a high-frequency coherent sound exactly 108 times provides the precise duration of time required for your brain functions to actually change. Let that sink in. It's not magic, it's a precise clinical dosage. 108 repetitions is the clinically observed threshold needed to successfully shift your brain's baseline frequency. And yet, it perfectly bridges that clinical data with some really beautiful ancient symbolism. While there are tons of explanations in the ancient scriptures, a primary symbolic meaning breaks the digits down like this. The 1 represents that you and I are one, we're deeply connected. The 0 represents nothingness, the void. And the 8 represents infinity. So we are full, we are infinite, and at the exact same time we are nothing. It's such a brilliant representation of the spiritual state you're trying to achieve, matched perfectly with the neurological time required to actually achieve it.
Let's move to our final section and see how this builds, finding your brain's frequency. So how can you actually apply this to your own life and target very specific results? I want you to think of these mantras almost like a pharmacy for a digital frequency pill. Different sounds produce entirely different neurological results. For example, the 2011 Kalyani meta-analysis showed that chanting Om, or Om Shivaya Namah, is highly calming and immediately targets the vagus nerve, which is absolutely perfect if you're dealing with high anxiety or stress. On the flip side, studies on Krishna chants show they specifically boost the capacity of your prefrontal cortex. And if you really need to activate your brain, grow your intelligence capacity, and generate those activating beta and alpha waves, well, the Gayatri mantra is heavily prescribed for that. The real key here is that the repetition has to be a higher frequency, coherent sound. Just repeating random syllables won't do the trick. You really need these proven frequencies.
But here is the most absolutely crucial takeaway from Dr. Adadia's research. Consistency is literally everything when it comes to the brain. You can't just treat this like some quick magic trick. If you chant 108 times for 2 days and then just stop, you're not going to see permanent results. It is exactly like a prescribed therapy. Think about it. You wouldn't take a physical pill for 2 days and expect a lifelong cure, right? Japa is a digital frequency therapy. It requires continuous, daily application to permanently wire those new neural pathways and actually maintain that highly optimized altered state.
So the crucial point is this. We are no longer looking at japa merely as some mystical tradition. We are looking at an ancient, highly powerful neuroscientific technology designed for literal brain preservation and optimization. You can lower your blood pressure, manage your anxiety, increase your heart rate variability, and massively enhance your cognitive performance. So, I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought. If you had access to a completely free, scientifically proven digital frequency pill that could systematically rewire your brain for the better every single morning, wouldn't you take it? Think about that, and maybe try finding your frequency tomorrow morning. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep